Underlayment and course installation. For roof pitches of 6 and 12 and above, the entire roof deck must be covered with one layer of water-resistant roofing underlayment conforming to ASTM D226, covering the entire roof deck. In areas where the average daily temperature in January is 25 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, install an ice and water barrier that consists of a self-adhering polymer-modified bitumen sheet in lieu of normal underlayment at the eaves. Extend ice protection underlayment from the eaves edge to a point at least 24 inches inside the exterior wall line of the building. Chalk lines should be snapped on the underlayment with the tips of the shakes following the lines. Do not snap lines on the cedar shakes or use red chalk, as the chalk may permanently discolor the shakes. For roof pitches between 4 and 12 and 6 and 12, in addition to one of the base sheet options mentioned, install one layer of ASTM D226 Type 2 36-inch number 30 underlayment at the eave line. After applying the starter shakes, a minimum 18-inch wide strip of interlay of ASTM D226 Type 2 or ASTM D4869 number 30 shall be laid over the top portion of the starter shakes, the butt end of the interlay course extending upslope onto the sheathing, or dry in approximately 9 inches above the fascia, allowing for a 1-inch overhang. After installing the field shakes over the starter shakes, position the bottom edge of the next interlay on the 10-inch line of the interlay previously installed. Continue laying each course along the 10-inch line, or closer if the roof layout requires less than a 10-inch exposure. Felt interlayment on the cedar shakes is to be installed, so it does not extend below a line that is twice the exposure above the butt. For example, 23 1/4 inch shakes at 10-inch exposure would have felt applied 20 inches above the butt. No felt should be visible between the side joints of the shakes, also known as keyways. Additionally, no fasteners or shiners should be visible between keyways or after the roof is fully installed. Starter installation. Once the roofing underlayment is properly installed, begin the cedar roof installation by laying a course of the tapered cedar starter pieces, which measures 15 inches by 15 inches. Cedar starter shakes should be installed along all roof eave lines. Installation can begin at the center of the roof or from either side. Starter should provide 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch overhang at the eave edge. Where gutters are present, adjust the overhang as needed to ensure proper water flow into the gutters. The butts of the starter shakes and the first course of cedar shakes should project equally beyond the finished fascia. This ensures proper water drainage and should be adjusted based on site conditions. For proper horizontal alignment, snap a chalk line as a guide when placing the entire starter course. Secure each starter piece with 4 corrosive-resistant fasteners. These fasteners must be long enough to fully penetrate a minimum of 3/4 of an inch into the decking. The recommended fasteners are 1 3/4 inch hot-dipped galvanized ring shank roofing nails with an 11-gauge thickness and a 5/16 of an inch head. If cedar starter pieces needed to be cut, use a skill saw or a utility knife. Shake course installation. Now let's install the first course of cedar shakes, beginning on top of the cedar starter pieces. Cedar shakes are approximately 23 1/4 inches long and are manufactured in 3 widths. Each shake has dimple marks that indicate where the fasteners must be placed. The 5 1/4 inch and 7 1/4 inch shakes each have 2 fastener locations, while the 12 1/4 inch shakes have 3 fastener locations. Fasteners should be placed at, or as near as possible, to the fastener dimple marks to avoid improper installation. Fasten the cedar shakes over the starter pieces using the recommended fasteners. These fasteners must penetrate at least 3/4 of an inch into or through the decking. When installing the shakes, use a combination of different widths to ensure that side laps are no less than 1 1/2 inches. This can be done by alternating between the 5 1/4 inch, 7 1/4 inch, and 12 1/4 inch shakes in a randomized pattern. The minimum standard keyway is 1/4 of an inch and the maximum standard keyway is 3/8 of an inch. A 10-inch weather exposure for straight line installations is standard and has been used for all calculations, testing, and certifications. The number of cedar shakes per square is based on a 3/8 of an inch keyway. For a 1-inch staggered installation, Most shakes are laid with a 9-inch exposure, while random shakes are laid with a 10-inch exposure to create the 1-inch stagger. The maximum recommended stagger is 2 inches, with an 8-inch exposure. When installing in a staggered manner, the first course directly above the starter should be straight to align with the starter along all roof eaves. Then the remaining courses above the first course can be staggered. It's important to note that more cedar roofing material will be required for a staggered installation. To maintain proper horizontal alignment, snap chalk lines frequently on the underlayment and ensure that the tips of the shakes follow the lines. Avoid snapping chalk lines directly on the cedar shakes, and do not use red chalk as it may permanently stain the shakes. To maintain proper spacing, offset joints between courses a minimum of 1 1/2 inches. There's no set order when installing cedar shakes, but it is critical for roof performance and longevity that keyways do not line up from course to course. No fasteners or shiners should be visible between keyways or in exposed areas when the cedar roof installation is complete. After completing the first course, pay attention to course alignment for the following courses. When tabbing down or making repairs, use the CEDUR recommended adhesives, which are comprised of 100% silicone. Valley and rake edges installation. At the roof valleys, install a high-temperature ice and water barrier that consists of a self-adhering polymer-modified bitumen sheet in lieu of normal underlayment. This is to be installed in the valley prior to valley metal installation, according to local building code and best practices. Valley flashing should extend 11 inches from the center line each way for slopes of 312 and greater, and 14 inches for slopes less than 312. Both closed and open valleys are acceptable for installation, and it's required to use no less than 26-gauge corrosion-resistant metal flashing. Extend cedar shakes at least 4 inches over the valley metal flashing, and do not place fasteners within 5 inches of the flashing centerline. To avoid placing fasteners within 5 inches of the centerline, it's okay to position fasteners above the Dimple Mark locations and seal shakes with silicone adhesive. Remember, fasteners should never be placed in exposed areas, as they shouldn't be visible once the roof installation is complete. When working in valleys, make sure cuts are straight and even to ensure a clean, uniform installation. To avoid using small cut pieces near the valley, use larger shake pieces closer to the valley line. Keep in mind that 12 1/4 inch valley bundles are available for this purpose. For closed valleys, a W-valley metal flashing may be used with a 1 1/2 inch center crimp. In this case, cut the shakes flush to the center crimp for a clean finish. For open valleys, a W-valley flashing may be used with a 1-inch center crimp. Leave at least a 4-inch opening at the top of the valley to allow for proper drainage. Cedar shakes are solid and uniformly colored throughout, ensuring long-lasting color stability. They can be cut and scored easily using a utility knife or a skill saw. Because of their closed cell structure, cedar shakes do not require sealing or treatment on cut edges, as they prevent significant water absorption. A D-style flashing can be used for aesthetic purposes or to conceal the product. For all gable ends and rakes, extend cedar shakes approximately 3/4 inch over gable and rake ends. Hip and ridge installation. At roof hips, mark and trim the cedar starter pieces along the roof eave lines, ensuring a straight cut before installation. Pre-mark and cut shakes prior to installation, and vary the layout by using a 5 1/4 inch, 7 1/4 inch, and 12 1/4 inch shakes. To avoid using small cut pieces at the hip, use larger shakes or request 12 1/4 inch valley bundles directly from cedar. At roof hips, if cedar pieces are cut, the recommended fasteners may need to be placed outside the marked fastener locations. Drive the fasteners flush with the surface of the product. Be sure not to overdrive or underdrive them. Vary the shake selection and randomize between the 5 1/4 inch, 7 1/4 inch, and 12 1/4 inch shakes to create a natural look. Continue trimming and installing cedar shakes up the hip in a continuous line. Provide a minimum of 3/8 inch spacing across the center line of the hip and at unvented ridges. Use low-slope ridge tabs for ridge slopes between 4 and 12 and 7 and 12. Use medium-slope ridge tabs for ridge slopes between 8 and 12 and 11 and 12. Use high-slope ridge caps for ridge slopes between 12 and 12 and 14 and 12. For slopes above 14 and 12, up to 21 and 12, the ridge should be field assembled using 5 1/4 inch wide CEDUR field shake pieces. Install one layer of code-compliant underlayment and lap the roof underlayment over the hips and under the ridge pieces. Each hip and ridge piece requires 4 fasteners, 2 per side. Fasteners should be concealed by the overlapping piece, and they must penetrate through the deck or at least 3/4 of an inch into the deck. Longer fasteners may be required at hips and ridges to ensure adequate roof deck penetration. Ensure that no fasteners are exposed on the hip and ridge caps or on the field shakes. Where the hip caps meet at the ridge, dry fit, mark, cut, and score the CEDUR ridge to create a miter joint. At transitions, avoid exposed fasteners and apply a color-matched silicone-based sealant. Begin installing ridge caps at the gable ends. Double the performed hip and ridge course at the start of each hip. Where the ridge meets the roof slope, miter and seal the fasteners with a color-matched 100% silicone-based sealant. Roofing snow brackets are optional above walkway areas, but should be considered in mountain regions and areas with heavy snow loads. Custom flashing can also be used at transitions to achieve a desired appearance. Flashing details. Chimney and penetration flashing dimensions may vary depending on the chimney size, location, local building codes, roof size, and other factors. Before starting, verify code compliance and follow regional industry best practices. Windows, caps, and all other projections at points where rainwater accumulates are to be protected with metal flashing. For chimneys and rectangular penetrations, install shakes up to the base of the chimney, then place apron flashing over the shakes. The apron flashing should extend at least 6 inches past the chimney, rise a minimum of 5 inches up the chimney wall, and extend at least 5 inches onto the shakes. Return leg should extend a minimum of 3 inches along the chimney sidewall. Next, install step flashing, overlapping the apron flashing by at least 3 inches. Step flashing should extend a minimum of 5 inches onto the sidewall shakes. When chimneys, curbs, skylights, or any vertical protrusion through the roof are at least 30 inches wide, saddles or crickets are required. In areas with adverse weather conditions, use extended metal flashing lengths and a 36-inch wide layer of pressure-sensitive, polymer-modified bitumen flashing strip in sheet are required. These flashings are to extend not less than 10 inches under the shakes. Step flashing must be used where vertical surfaces occur in connection with slopes. Flashing is to be formed of separate pieces installed with each course of shakes and lap no less than 3 inches. Install a course of shakes over the step flashing. Place the next step flashing over the installed shake, ensuring that each piece laps the previous step flashing by at least 2 inches. For openings more than 30 inches wide, install cricket flashing. Lap the cricket flashing a minimum of 3 inches over the step flashing. The vertical leg of the cricket flashing should extend at least 3 inches above the apex. Complete the shake installation by extending the upper end of the cricket flashing at least 6 inches beyond the first course of shakes. Pan flashing may also be used as an alternative to step flashing. Install pan flashing on the sides of the chimney, lapping a minimum of 3 inches onto the apron flashing. Extend the pan flashing at least 5 inches over the sidewall shakes. To prevent water intrusion, verify that all flashing and counter flashing is properly installed. This flashing should extend at least 14 inches up the slope of the roof. For pipe penetrations, install self-adhered deck flashing that meets ASTM D1970 standards. All pipes projecting through the roofs must have a deck flashing and be waterproofed appropriately. The flashing flanges are to extend out on the roof not less than 6 inches. The flashing flanges are to be of sufficient length to cover the shakes course below the pipe and extend up under the butt of the course above as far as possible without being punctured by fasteners. Maintain a 1-inch shake clearance around the pipe projection. Install underlayment that extends a minimum of 10 inches past the penetration. Install a 1-piece pipe boot or a malleable metal flashing sleeve over the pipe. Using a minimum 20-inch by 20-inch deck flashing that meets or exceeds ASTM D1970, cut the flashing to fit over the pipe. The flashing flanges are to extend a minimum of 6 inches from the pipe. Roofing cement can be used to seal transitions for added protection. Install shake courses in the usual manner below the penetration. Then, install the next course and cut a shake to fit over the opening. Install the cut shake and continue the roof installation. A moisture-resistant barrier must be installed between galvanized flashing and vertical surfaces. Flashing should extend no less than 10 inches under the shakes to provide adequate protection. Around rectangular penetrations, deck flashing should be turned up a minimum of 4 inches. Step flashing should extend no less than 5 inches under the shakes and no less than 5 inches up the vertical surface where the shakes meet. Dormer flashing shall run up not less than 6 inches under the shakes and a minimum of 5 inches up the vertical surface. Complete the installation by installing the remaining shake courses. Thank you for choosing CEDUR, where beauty and durability meet to create a long-lasting roofing solution. For complete roof installation information, product handling tips, and pre-construction considerations, be sure to reference CEDUR resources available at CEDUR.com. Experience the unmatched quality and performance of CEDUR, and let your roof make a lasting impression.